Hello and welcome to the Parry's Pickups. Now, this time's episode is going to be another import special following on sort of from the N64 one I did last time. This one's definitely a much more mixed bag, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to provide gameplay footage in this video. Basically I'm in the UK at the moment and I don't quite have enough time to record all the footage, so it's either I show a load of games or show a couple of games, and I kind of got a lot of imports at the moment, so I'm going to share them all with you today. I'll start off with one of the older ones. This is actually picked up for me by good friend and fellow podcaster Matt Boyle, and that is the Japanese GameCube version of a game we know in the West as Ribbit King. Which, interestingly, I noticed on this case that, well, in Europe and the US, I suppose, the game is referred to as Frolf. This is basically the game they play within this game is a version of golf where you are using a hammer and a frog. I won't go into the details, but you really should try it out. It's great fun. But in this Japanese version, it's, of course, Frolf is, you know, the English equivalent of frog golf. What seems to be the Japanese equivalent of frog golf is Karoff. And there we are, if you didn't know that. And also, the branding on this version is DX, Deluxe. So, I guess when it was brought out on GameCube, it was brought out as a deluxe version of the PS2 game. And I was always under the impression the PS2 game came later than the GameCube one, but it appears that the GameCube one is the later version of the game. So now I can play this on the GameCube as well, which is pretty cool. Another game that Matt picked up for me, as a gift, this one was, and you may have heard about it on the podcast quite some time ago, but that was Zero Divide. Zero Divide is a fighting game with giant robots. It's not one of my favourites, and that is why I think Matt picked it up for me, because he's actually quite a big fan of this series. There's two games in the series, as far as I know, on the PlayStation 1. And it's by no means a bad fighting game. It's just not the greatest, but it brought a smile to my face when Matt gave me this as a gift. And this was a game that Matt picked up for me from Japan, and it was a game that I was after. And this game is the Sunsoft collection for PS2. And this is a collection of fighting games developed by Sunsoft. All these games were originally released on the Saturn, and probably the Neo Geo before that, I think. This disc, I thought, contained Galaxy Fight, Waku Waku 7, and I think it's called Astra Superstars. Well, it turns out it only actually contains Galaxy Fight and Waku Waku 7, which are two games I already own on the Saturn. So, really the only reason I wanted this was to get an affordable version of Astra Superstars, because it's a very expensive fighting game. Even in Japan it would seem, because Matt found me a copy, but it was very expensive, so I decided to go for this. It was a cheaper option, but unfortunately it does not contain the game I was after. So yes, now I have a copy of Sunsoft collection that really isn't much use to me, but, you know, having the ability to play those two games on the PS2 is pretty cool. I'll be interested to see what the versions of the games are like compared to the Saturn versions. Could be interesting. I guess it's another fighting game to add to the sizable collection. Next up, we're going to jump into the realm of puzzle games, and we'll start off with a series I've started collecting, and that's the Puyo Puyo series. Probably most famous at the moment for its Tetris variant, Puyo Puyo Tetris, which has recently come out on the Switch, PS4, Xbox One, in Japan that is, PS Vita. There's also a Wii U version in Japan, so it's all over the shop. But we're going back a few years now to 1996 and the PS1 version of Puyo Puyo 2. Here it is, and Puyo Puyo 2 is a game I have yet to play. I haven't got my Japanese PS2 out at the moment, so I haven't had a chance to give this one a go. I have played the original Puyo Puyo in the form of Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, so it's going to be interesting to compare and see how the sequel is different from that, at least. So I've got that one to try out. Next up, the sequel, rather than being called Puyo Puyo 3, it was called Puyo Puyo Sun. And here is the Saturn version. I also have this on the N64, which I mentioned in the previous video. That version's really good. I'd say, having played this, I would prefer the N64 version, only because being a CD based game, this has load times, whereas the N64 version doesn't, and I don't think it does anything too different other than having FMV opening sequence. But there's something very cool about the N64's open sequence, because it's all rendered with sprites, which is very nice. But it's cool to have this game nonetheless on the Saturn, and it gives me the option to play Puyo Puyo on the Saturn, which is very good. So if I want to play Puyo Puyo on the Dreamcast, I now have Puyo Puyo 4. Interesting to note, I played a bit of this game this morning, and it's really hard. Even on the first level of the arcade mode, I really struggled to beat it. It's still just as fun as any other Puyo Puyo game, but a real challenge, this one. That's Puyo Puyo 4 for the Japanese Dreamcast. And we'll stick with the Dreamcast just for one moment, while we talk about Grandia 2, jumping away from the puzzle games for a second into the RPGs. Just lately I've been getting into RPGs more and more, so this was always a game I wanted to own on the Dreamcast. It was originally released for the Dreamcast and later the PS2. The original Grandia is a game I've got on the PS1, which is also rather nice, although of course that originally came out on the Saturn. So it's sort of been a Sega mainstay, and then later a Sony game. But I played a little bit of this morning. Really lovely sharp graphics on the Dreamcast, as with any Dreamcast game. And it's, according to the back, undeniably the prettiest role-playing game ever to grace a console, back in wherever this was released, and I can't quite remember now. 2000. This was published by Ubisoft, which is interesting to note. And this is the American version. What's cool about this, it comes with the soundtrack, and I don't think the PAL version does. So if you have the means to play American Dreamcast games, I think this is a version of Grandia 2 to get. It's got some really nice packaging as well. They've gone all out here, and I'd say that again is preferable to the regular PAL version in the blue box. Quite a substantial manual there, and it's all in colour too. So really fantastic package, very affordable for around about £20, and I think that's pretty good considering you pay with of £30 to £40 for the PAL version of Grandia 2 nowadays. Then this is probably the one to get. So I'm going to jump back to puzzle games for a second to talk about another Dreamcast title, this time on the Japanese Dreamcast. That is Tetris 4D. Interesting game this. The main difference between this and regular Tetris is it's sort of 3D, or 4D as it would have you believe. So as the blocks come down, the perspective you have on them changes slightly, so when they get to the bottom you can kind of see them angling back. It's difficult to explain, but you're not looking on it flat, you're kind of looking at it slightly from above at times. You see the angle switches as the bricks come down. It's not jarring or anything, it's just placing them at first can just take a little bit of getting used to. That seems to be the main the main difference, in this Tetris game as compared to some other ones. Presentation looks all a little bit cheap. Some of the choices of typeface are particularly nasty. If I can show you the back of the box there, if that will just get in focus for a minute. It's not the most nicest looking game around, unfortunately, but it plays a reasonable game of Tetris, and once you adjust to that strange viewing angle, then there is quite a lot to enjoy here. But it's only got basic modes, so don't expect bazillions of different variations of Tetris in this game. There are a few, and a fairly robust multiplayer, but otherwise it's not the best version of Tetris out there. But it is better than some and contains the things you expect out of a Tetris game, which is, for example, being able to drop the... I think you can drop the pieces fast in this one. It's got a... You either press up or press a button to do that, which is really good, because some Tetris games don't give you that ability. And yeah, everything else plays as it should do. Moving on to the Saturn, shall we, is Tetris S, which is an interesting version of Tetris that features a monkey. I don't know if this was a trend in Sega Tetris games, because we saw Sega Tetris on the Dreamcast, which again was only released in Japan, also contained a monkey. This monkey doesn't do much or add to it particularly. The game plays out on a background of different cityscapes, different landscapes, that changes every now and again. The game has an annoying feature, whereas usually in Tetris games, as soon as a piece enters the what do you call that? The playing field, shall we say, you can turn it. Well, you can only turn it after it drops to a certain point. So it's a very small part at the top of the screen that you can't turn the piece in. So you have to get used to that, which seems like a pointless change to me. I don't think you can also turn the pieces at the side of the playing field either, which is also a little bit iffy. So I would not necessarily recommend this version of Tetris. It is okay, but it has some annoying little quirks that really shouldn't be there. So that's Tetris S for the Saturn. It's a way at least of playing Tetris on the Saturn. And lastly, Tetris for the PS2. Not Tetris Worlds, as I've covered in several other videos, but this is Tetris Collection, which is another Sega version of Tetris, and one I haven't had a chance to play yet. I'm a little concerned now whether or not this is going to be close to Tetris S in how it plays, or it's going to be more like regular Tetris. But it looks like it has quite a few modes, and also contains a monkey. So yes, I can confirm now it is a theme of Tetris, Sega Tetris games that they have monkeys in. But that's Tetris Collection for the PS2, Japanese. And lastly, not a Japanese game like Grandia 2 before it. This is an American import. And this one is WrestleMania. What is that? WrestleMania 11, 21. Oh shucks. Yeah. And last up, we're moving back to the Grandia 2 territory in American imports, and we're going to talk a little bit about WrestleMania 21, which is an American GameCube game that I picked up from Glasgow, actually, when I was there a couple of weeks ago. So this game is available in PAL territories, but I found it for £5. And seeing that I've got the ability to play American GameCube games with the use of a boot disc, I thought, why the heck not pick this up, because I wanted to check out the revenge mode on this, which is a sort of story mode, which is a little bit like a 3D beat 'em up type thing. So I wanted to try that out, but first of all, when I tried this, I jumped into the exhibition mode, into this regular match, and it's amazingly pick up and play. This game it's really good, and you don't have to kind of struggle with any unique features this has got. It actually plays quite similar to the games on the N64, namely the WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy, WCW vs NWO World Tour, and so on. In the form like if you want to do a special, you do a special taunt, and then that powers up your wrestler to do a special attack. Also, just everything seems very straightforward and pick up and play like those other games. So I'm glad I picked this up, because I was a little bit unsure about it and thought the revenge mode could be interesting, but the main wrestling game might just be a little bit disappointing. It's not at all. It's a really great game, and I very much recommend it. So that is it. Thank you very much for checking out this video. Sorry there's no gameplay footage this time. It's a little bit difficult for me to get that done in the time I had. But I hope you've enjoyed hearing about some of these import games I've picked up recently. And we'll see you again for another Parry's Pickups. Bye for now.